Hi everyone, we are Team 3 and we'll be presenting our case analysis on MTN and the Nigerian fine. We ask that you hold any questions you may have about the case or our analysis until we finish, and we'll be glad to answer them. Before we get into the case, we wanted briefly to introduce ourselves, as we would if we were presenting to you today in a classroom. Our team consists of two rebel types. We have travelers and climbers. You can see the travelers are myself, Charlie, Ivana. We enjoy meeting new people, moving freely, and sharing our experiences with others. And our climbers are Bella, Juliana, and Christina, who enjoy seeing the world from new perspectives. Our rebel types combined allow for us to examine this case through different point of views, which makes our analysis stronger. So a little bit about MTN before we get into things. MTN is short for Mobile Telephone Networks. It's a South African multinational telecommunications company. As of June 2016, the company recorded just shy of 233 million subscribers, making them the 8th largest operator in the world and the largest in Africa. A third of the company's revenue comes from Nigeria, despite them being active in over 20 other countries. The company is 26 years old with around 20,000 employees.
Okay, thanks, Anna Claire. So just to go into a little bit of an overview on the case, on October 26, 2015, MTN was fined 5.2 billion US dollars by the Nigerian Communications Commission. This was the largest fine in the telecommunications industry ever. The second largest was a $100 million fine against AT&T. And as you can tell, that's a dramatic difference. The fine basically stemmed from the Nigerian government requiring the registration of SIM cards on prepaid phones, as there was concern that terrorist organizations were using prepaid phones to essentially hide their activities. MTN was warned a couple times with a few smaller fines, and then ultimately the government found they still had not corrected the error and levied this fine. Analysts in the industry saw the fine as excessive, to say the least. The fine made up 80% of the fine was MTN's 2014 revenue, so in Nigeria. So it was very large, and obviously MTN had a problem on their hands. So our suggestion for MTN sort of stems from how they can handle this moving forwards and how they can sort of continue to operate in this niche emerging markets business. Primarily, we're going to encourage MTN to work with their local South African government to negotiate with Nigeria. However, assuming that no negotiation can be found, we're going to suggest that MTN could offer a public-private partnership with the Nigerian government and basically offer them a portion of their Nigerian subsidiary. This could be really attractive to Nigeria, as in 1999, the Nigerian government actually had its own telecommunications business, so they've already have some understanding of what's going on, and could essentially make this emerging market less reliant on oil, which is their #1 export. The kind of final suggestion we have is for MTN to establish some oversight boards with local ambassadors. This should lower transaction costs in the long term, although increase them in the short term, but could also do things like strengthen institutions in Nigeria and lower political risk also.
So, after the 1999 deregulation of the telecommunications sector in Nigeria, 4 licenses were granted to the telecommunications operations, including MTN, Communications Investment Ltd, and Econet Wireless, as well as Nitel. Over time, Nitel was liquidated and Communications Investment Ltd got its license revoked, and after a few corporation changes, Econet became Airtel Nigeria and Globacom Limited had entered the Nigerian telecommunications market. In 2016, MTN was the largest network operator with close to 40% market share. Telephone lines and internet subscribers increased by millions, while fixed lines decreased by 90% from 2007 to 2016. By 2016, the number of combined subscribers from the four global system for mobile communications companies totaled over 153 million subscribers. With an increasing market, companies face pressures to reduce prices while also abiding by the NCC rules and stipulations. Given that MTN was not the only telecommunications company to fail to remove all unregistered subscribers, it seemed unjust to only fine MTN after the second registration attempt.
MTN's key competitive advantages were those of adapting to the changing market conditions typical of emerging market countries, as well as providing new services at competitive market prices. MTN was successful at filling institutional voids and meeting the demands of operating in high-poverty environments. As such, MTN was able to operate in war-torn countries, as well as maintain its operations largely unconstrained by the Ebola epidemic. A key factor in the success of MTN's approach was its prepaid subscription model. This model overcame the difficulty of billing customers who did not have bank accounts or did not engage in the official financial services sector. In order to maintain its competitive advantage, MTN identified pertinent risks well in advance and implemented effective risk mitigating strategies. The risks it identified recognized the evolving operating environment. Among these were the customer pressures that accompanied operating in emerging market economies, where infrastructure is not as prevalent as in developed countries. For example, MTN had to engage with local communities to protect power generators and electrical equipment from theft. MTN seized the opportunity of filling in institutional and infrastructural voids, which in turn enabled the expansion of its operations. MTN invested heavily, more than $15 billion in infrastructure in Nigeria, and it also allocated over $32 million to highly publicized and marketed projects spanning education, health, and economic empowerment, which likely contributed to building rapport with the government, something that is pertinent to mitigating political risks, and contributed to shareholder value, which it also raised through innovation and the sharing of best practices across the group. Finally, unlike its other competitors, MTN did not engage in improperly close relations with the government.
In 2015, MTN's strategy revolved around 5 main topics. These topics were 1, creating and managing stakeholder value, 2, creating a distinct customer experience, 3, driving sustainable growth, 4, transforming the operating model, and 5, innovation and best practices. The financial impact of the Nigerian fine on MTN's profitability in 2015 was very significant. This fine that MTN received was equal to $5.2 billion US dollars, and this fine was more than the revenue MTN made in 2014 from its affiliate in Nigeria, which was around $4 billion US dollars. Along with this, we do not believe that this fine was appropriate. When the fines first began, all 4 of the telecommunication operators were fined, which were MTN, Airtel, Globacom, and Etisalat. But as the fines continued and the amounts grew, NCC began to focus only on MTN, specifically in the third quarter of 2015. Also, the amount of this fine was so large that it caused MTN's credit ratings to be lowered by Moody's and Standard & Poor's to negative Baa2. If our group was to be a consultant to MTN's CEO, we would recommend that MTN put its best efforts forth to gain the trust of the government. By complying with the government in every way possible, this can help the relationship between MTN and the government grow and become stronger.
Okay, so now we're going to connect our case to our class concepts. So as we mentioned before, we recommended that MTN proposes a partnership with the Nigerian government. So the first key concept that we are relating our case to is transitional cost. If MTN did a partnership with the Nigerian government, it would cause an increase in the transactional cost in the short run, but it would have greater benefits in the long run that would override this short-term cost. Going along with our second concept, which was political risk. If MTN joined the government, its political risk will decrease. If they're able to negotiate a limited partnership with the government, they will gain greater efficiency at handling SIM cards accounts and will have the African government backing them up, allowing them to focus only on operations. These negotiations would be in the best interest of all stockholders. So our third key concept was the strengths of the institutions. As MTA partners with the government, it would align its interests, creating a transparency and a meaningful growth that will portray in the Nigerian society. And lastly, our last concept would be emerging markets. So the Nigerian GDP per capita is $2,229, with more than 50% of the population living in extreme poverty. Due to this, for telecommunication companies working in countries like Nigeria, where poverty rates are so hard, it's very complex. Nigeria lacks a lot of purchasing power and outside investment, even though telecommunication companies still have high expenses for the high infrastructure development they have to do. Being part of a developing country is going to help them, mainly to MTN. MTN was created in South Africa, giving them a greater advantage. And as MTN joins the developing countries like Nigeria, they will expand their economy that is mainly based on one industry.
So in conclusion, I'll touch on a few of the short-term and medium to long-term effects, I guess, of what our analysis. So in short term, by offering the partnership instead of the fine, MTN can expect transaction costs to rise. This will stem from costs associated with establishing oversight committees, having a greater presence in their overseas markets. MTN shareholders can also expect to see a decrease in earnings as foreign revenues will be split with local governments. More in the long term, MTN's reputation should be good. For the most part, it should be restored. Their positive image will allow future transaction costs to be lower as governments around the world will start to place trust in them and applaud their transparency. Among other positive long-term effects, MTN will also benefit from being paired alongside emerging markets with explosive growth opportunities. Our team believes that while MTN was unfairly fined, our suggestions can assist them to grow as a company looking towards the future. So we're excited. I'm not sure if we can share the first link with you guys. I think it might be only for us in our Harvard Pack, but we can share these, or at least try to share them with you guys in the comments if possible. And thank you. If you guys have any questions, if Professor lets us, you guys can raise your hands.